All right, welcome to One Man's Faith, the second part today. Hopefully you're in Numbers chapter 12, okay? I was just kind of giving a little bit of an introduction since I only had a few minutes. I didn't want to jump into this without, and then have to take that break. So the people of Israel are in Egypt because of the famine. They stay there. They become a populated nation. Egypt becomes afraid of them, puts them in bondage, and then they cry out to the Lord, and the Lord sends Moses. The Lord chose Moses. That's the first thing to note tonight. The Lord chose Moses to lead the people. Moses had been living for 40 years in Midian. He had married a Midian woman. And they had, I think it was 2 children, and he was tending the sheep for his father, who was a priest of Midian. And the Lord met him there and said, Moses, I want you to go and I want you to lead my people out. I want you to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And so the Lord chose Moses against Moses's desire, really. You know, he came up with the thing, but Lord, I stutter, you know. And God said, hey, forget it, kid. I've chosen you. Go. So Moses goes back into Egypt, and now all the 10 plagues, all that stuff has happened. Passover has happened. The Feast of First Fruits has happened. The Feast of Unleavened Bread has happened, so to speak. And they have left Egypt. They have left Egypt. They're in the desert. And on this journey, they come to the mountain, and they kind of park there. They kind of park there because they're going to build the tabernacle. That's going to take them a while. They stay at the mountain for about a year, I believe, if I remember correctly, maybe a little bit longer. Okay, during that time, Numbers 12. Okay, then Miriam and Aaron. Now Miriam, Aaron, and Moses are brothers and sisters. Okay. God chose Moses to lead him out, but he chose Aaron to be his spokesperson for Moses because Moses came up with that excuse of stuttering, okay? So Aaron is a spokesperson. He also becomes high priest. Miriam is a prophetess. All right, so Miriam, Aaron, and Moses are the leaders taking Israel out. And it says Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. Numbers 12:1. Because of the Cushite woman, the Midian priest's daughter, Sephora, whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken to us as well? And this next phrase, and the Lord heard it. Oh, listen, everything we say, the Lord hears. No matter how low you whisper it, the Lord hears. And here are Miriam and Aaron, his brother and sister, Moses' brother and sister, and they said, has the Lord really led through Moses? Did he call Moses? What about us? Are we chopped liver? And the Lord heard it. You know, it's easy, or sometimes it's easier to speak about our brothers and sisters than it is about anybody outside our family because we know them so well. And so we see their flaws and all. And so here are Miriam and Aaron, and they're speaking against Moses because he married outside the family, so to speak. Well, I mean, he was gone 40 years. Well, you know, he had no plans of coming back. He was gone, and, you know, sayonara. Egypt and Israel. I'm going to be out here because he murdered somebody and he knew he couldn't go back or they would get him. But the Lord called him. And so it says in verse 3, now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and Miriam, hey, you three, come here. Uh-oh. That sounds like trouble, huh? Hey, come here. So the three of them came out. In verse 5, then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the doorway of the tent, and he called Aaron and Miriam. And when they both came forward, he said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, shall make myself known to him in visions. I shall speak to him in dreams. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all his household. With him I speak mouth to mouth. In other words, face to face. In prophets, the prophets that are among you, I speak to them in dreams and visions, but not with Moses. Moses is different. Moses is my man. He's the big man on campus here. He's the big man. I speak to him face to face. He is faithful in all my household. And with him I speak mouth to mouth, even openly and not in dark sayings. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant? Whoa. And this is a statement we're going to see in several places here. Why were you not afraid? You see, they should have been afraid because God put Moses in that position. Moses is God's anointed. Moses is the man that God chose. In other words, he's saying to them, hey, you should have been afraid and you weren't. What gives? And verse 9, so the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he departed. But when the cloud was withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. As Aaron turned toward Miriam, behold, she was leprous. And then Aaron said to Moses, oh, my Lord, talking to Moses, I beg you, do not account this sin to us, in which we have acted foolishly and in which we have sinned. Like, Moses, what have you done? There wasn't Moses. Moses didn't do anything. And it's like, Moses, don't hold us against her. Like, he could do anything. Verse 12, oh, do not let her be like one did, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes from his mother's womb. Moses cried out to the Lord. That's the only thing Moses could do. He cried out to the Lord and said, oh God, heal her, I pray. But the Lord said to Moses, if her father had spit in her face, would she not bear her shame for 7 days? Let her be shut up for 7 days outside the camp, and afterwards she may be received again. So Miriam was shut up outside the gate, or outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on until Miriam was received again. So the Lord says, listen, okay, I hear your prayer. I understand what you're saying. See, Moses was never about himself. Moses could have said, hey, God, she deserves it. Thank you. He didn't. You know, Aaron cried out to him like he could do anything. The only thing he could do would be to go to God. Aaron knew that he could go to God. So he went to God, and God said, listen, if her father had spit in her face, she would be unclean for 7 days. Let it be so in this case. Interesting. It was Miriam and Aaron that were talking against Moses. Why wasn't Aaron struck? Why wasn't Aaron struck? The only good explanation that we could probably come up with is this. Aaron was also God's anointed. He had been put in the position of being high priest. And as long as he was high priest, and I mean, for the high priest, he was high priest continually, so he kept the robes on. As long as he was enclosed in those robes, he was God's anointed. He was different than just a man. He stood in a place like an intercessor. He performed the priestly duties of consecrating the people, of coming into God on the one day a year that he could, on the Day of Atonement. All the rest of the times he handled, he helped Moses with disputes, but he also interceded for the people. He performed sacrifices. He watched over those that were priests. He taught them what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and all that. So Aaron at that time was God's anointed. Now, there came a time when God said, okay, Aaron, that's it. It's time for you to die. Whoa. And so he took him up on Mount, I believe it was Mount Hor, and they took the robes off of him, put him on his son Eleazar, and Aaron died. See, the consequence came later, but it came. Aaron wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. It wasn't Aaron that struck the rock twice. It was Moses. But I believe because of this and because of his position, he wasn't allowed to go into the promised land either. He died before the promised land. They spoke against God's anointed. God took offense at those two speaking against Moses. Why? Well, because God took it as they coming against him. They were dissing his man. It's just like when we decide to do something out of what God has planned, we diss God. When we decide that we no longer want to be the sex that he made us, like Bruce Jenner, all of a sudden now he's a woman. Listen, that's totally against God's plan. God doesn't make mistakes and he doesn't make junk. And so when you decide you don't want to be the person God has made you, you're saying to God. You're saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. Let me tell you, here's what's going to really happen. And we go off and we do our own thing. Dangerous place to be in. We're going to look at that in just a minute. Okay, it's time for break number 2. So let's go ahead and take that break and I'll be right back.